Hey everyone! Tonight we're diving into a world where the wind howls like a pack of wolves and the cold sinks its teeth into your bones. Picture this: you're standing in a muddy village, your breath puffing out in clouds as a medieval winter creeps in, ready to test your grit. Life in the Middle Ages wasn't exactly cozy, and for peasants, surviving these months was a battle against nature itself. You might not survive this honestly. Most of us wouldn't last a week without Wi-Fi, let alone warmth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're chilling tonight. Now, turn down the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started on tonight's journey together. You shuffle through the frost-crusted dirt of your village, the sky above a slab of iron-gray clouds. Medieval winter survival wasn't just a season, it was a gauntlet. The air stings your face, and you pull your threadbare cloak tighter, knowing the extreme cold in the Middle Ages could kill faster than a knight's sword. It's late November, around 1340, and the first snowflakes dust your shoulders like ash. You're a peasant, not some fancy lord with a roaring hearth. So how do you even begin to face this? No fire, no food. Survival in medieval times meant getting scrappy and fast. Your hut squats at the edge of the village, a lumpy pile of wattle and daub that looks like it's shivering too. How peasants lived in winter was all about preparation, and you've been at it since harvest. You spent weeks smearing fresh mud over the walls, packing it with straw to keep the wind out. It's not exactly a fortress gap, still whistle like a bad flute player, but it's better than nothing. Inside, the floor is packed earth, cold as a gravestone. So you've heaped it with rushes and old straw. Smells like a barn, but it's insulation. Medieval style. You joke to yourself that it's the Dark Ages winter struggles, deluxe package drafty, damp, and dirt cheap. You check the roof, a tangle of thatch that's your only shield against snow. Last month, you climbed up with your neighbor, Watt, to patch holes with extra straw. If this collapses, Watt grunted. We're sleeping with the pigs. You laughed, but pigs sound warmer than this place. Historical survival stories often skip the boring bits. But this is the daily life of peasants in winter, endless tinkering to keep the cold at bay. Around this time, the Great Famine of 1315, 1317 lingers in village memory, a grim reminder of what happens when winter and hunger team up. Folks still whisper about families who didn't make it, their huts now crumbling relics. Your body's next on the prep list. You can't just layer up like it's a ski trip clothing scarce. Your tunic's patched so many times it's practically a quilt, and your shoes are leather scraps tied with twine. To toughen up, you rub your hands with goose fat, a trick your ma swore by. It's gross. Smells like a butcher's stall, and probably won't stop frostbite, but it's better than cracked skin bleeding in the snow. Historians still debate whether peasants used animal fats more for warmth or cooking, but you're slathering it on like medieval sunscreen. What did peasants eat in winter? Not much yet, but you've stashed some barley and dried peas in a clay pot, buried under the floor to keep rats out. You'll stretch those like a miser hoarding gold. You glance at the sky, where the sun's already dipping like it's got better places to be. No fire tonight, wood's too precious, and you've got maybe a week's worth stashed. Instead, you'll rely on your own heat, curling up with your sister and her kids in a pile of blankets that smell like mildew and desperation. It's not cozy, but it's how medieval peasants survived the cold winter's raw stubbornness and a bit of ingenuity. You mutter a sarcastic prayer to St. Cuthbert, patron of shepherds, asking for a mild winter. No blizzards. Yeah, I'm not built for this. The wind howls back, like it's laughing at you. As you crawl into your hut, the cold seeps into your bones. A reminder that winter's just getting started. You think of the village elder's tale about a man who survived a snowstorm by wrapping himself in sheepskins and praying till dawn. Sounds like a long shot, but you file it away. Medieval peasant life during harsh winters was about these little tricks. Passed down like heirlooms, you drift off, the wind rattling your door, wondering how you'll face tomorrow's frost. Spoiler, it's not going to be fun. You wake up stiff, your breath fogging in the dim light that sneaks through the cracks of your hut. The medieval winter's got its claws in deep now, and your home's no sanctuary. Life in the Middle Ages meant living in spaces that felt like nature's walk-in freezer. And your wattle and daub shack is proof. No fire, no food worth bragging about, just you, your family, and a pile of straw between you and the cold. You mutter, if this is cozy, I'm a king's cousin, as you untangle yourself from the blanket heap where your sister and her 2 kids slept like a litter of puppies. Medieval peasant life during harsh winters was all about body heat, and last night, it was your only weapon. Your hut's a drafty box, maybe 10 feet by 15, with walls that wheeze every time the wind kicks up. You stuffed the gaps with moss and rags back in autumn, but the extreme cold of the Middle Ages laughs at your efforts. The air inside's so chilly you can see your breath swirl like a ghost. You shuffle across the straw-strewn floor, your bare feet numb as stones. Should have stolen the pig's spot. You grumble, half joking, remembering how the village swine sleep in their own warm muck. Insulation's your only defense, and you've piled every scrap you own, rushes, old cloaks, even a tattered sack into a nest. It's not much, but it's how peasants lived in winter, turning their homes into makeshift burrows. You check the door. A creaky slab of wood that barely fits the frame. Last week, you smeared it with clay to block drafts, but frost's already spiderwebbing the edges. You think of the Black Death's early whispers in 1347, still a few years off, but already a grim tale in nearby towns. Villagers said cold huts like yours made folks sicker, crowding together with no heat. Historical survival stories don't sugarcoat it. Weak shelters meant death for some. You shake off the thought and focus. No fire means no smoke. At least so your lungs aren't choking on soot like they would in a lord's hall. Your sister, Agnes, stirs, her kid still snoring. We need more straw, she mumbles, rubbing her hands. You nod, knowing the village common's picked clean by now. Instead, you grab a broom, really just a bundle of twigs, and sweep the floor, stirring up dust that dances in the weak light. It's a pointless chore, but it keeps you moving. And movement's warmth. What did peasants eat in winter? Not yet, but you're already dreaming of the barley porridge you'll boil later, if you can spare the wood. For now, you chew a strip of dried apple, tough as leather, from your hidden stash. It's not a feast, but it's something. You step outside and the cold slap at you like an angry nun. The village is silent. Every hut sealed tight against the dark age's winter struggles. You notice your neighbor's chimney, nothing. Nobody's burning wood yet. It's too early in the season. back inside. You experiment with the trick your uncle swore by hanging a wool blanket over the doorframe to trap heat. It's so moth-eaten it looks like lace, but it cuts the draft a bit. Historians still debate whether peasants prioritized insulating homes or saving energy for food prep, but you're doing both. Barely. You joke to Agnes, if we freeze, at least we'll look fancy in this blanket tent. She snorts, and it's the warmest thing in the room. The kids wake, whining about the cold. You distract them by piling more straw on their legs, pretending it's a game. You're lords now, buried in treasure, you say, and they giggle. But the truth is, medieval winter survival meant keeping everyone alive, especially the little ones. You huddle together, sharing warmth like it's currency. Your hut's no palace, but it's yours, and you've made it a fortress against the frost. You think of the solstice, still weeks away, and mutter, winter's long, but we're tougher. The wind howls outside like it's daring you to prove it. You're hunched over a clay pot in your hut. The air's so cold your fingers fumble like they've forgotten their job. Medieval winter survival means every crumb counts, and you're staring at your dwindling food stash like it's a puzzle you can't solve. Life in the Middle Ages wasn't kind to empty bellies, and with no fire to cook, you're scraping by on starvation rations. The wind rattles your door, and you mutter, if this is luxury, I'm moving to a cave. Medieval peasant life during harsh winters turned eating into a strategy game. And you're no master chef, just a survivor trying to stretch what's left. Your food's buried under the floor, a trick to keep rats and frost at bay. You dig up the pot, brushing off dirt, and inventory your haul: a handful of barley, some dried peas, and a shriveled onion that looks like it's given up. What did peasants eat in winter? Barely enough, and you're rationing like a miser. You measure out a scoop of barley, whispering, don't betray me. Little grains. You soak them in water from a bucket half frozen. Naturally to soften them for a cold porridge. It's not gourmet, but it's how peasants lived in winter, turning scraps into survival. You think back to autumn, when you and Agnes spent days preserving what you could. You dried apples over a smoky fire, pickled cabbage in a cracked jar, and even tried salting a fish Watt traded you. That fish smells like regret now, but you'll eat it if you must. The extreme cold in the Middle Ages made preservation tricky, too damp, and mold crept in, too dry, and food turned to dust. You've got a secret weapon, though a weird trick your ma taught you. You wrap your onions in straw and bury them in ash from last month's fire. Keeps them fresher, somehow. Historians still debate whether ash preservation was common or just a quirky village hack. But you're not arguing with results. Around 1322, the Great Famine's scars were still fresh, and your village elder loves reminding everyone how folks boiled grass when grain ran out. Historical survival stories like that keep you paranoid, so you're obsessive about portions. You divvy up the porridge, giving the kids extra because their whiny faces break you. Eat slow, you tell them, or you'll be licking the pot. They giggle, but you're half serious. No fire, no food. Survival in medieval times meant mastering hunger. And you're learning fast. You chew your own share, gritty and tasteless, and glance at the door. The Dark Ages' winter struggles meant planning for weeks, not days. You've got maybe a month's worth of grain if you're stingy, but spring's a distant dream. To stretch it, you mix in ground acorns you foraged last fall. They're bitter, make your stomach gurgle, but they fill the gap. Fun fact, some peasants ate acorn bread so often their teeth wore down like cattle. You joke to Agnes, "We're basically squirrels now. Where's my fluffy tail?" She rolls her eyes, but it cuts the gloom. The kids finish, licking their fingers, and you stash the pot back underground. You're tempted to nibble an apple slice, but resist discipline's your only armor. Instead, you sip water, pretending it's soup. How medieval peasants survived the cold winters wasn't with feast, but with grit. And you're channeling that now. You huddle with your family, their warmth a reminder of why you're fighting. "We'll make it." You whisper more to yourself than them. Outside, snow falls like it's burying your hopes. But you're not done yet. You trudge through the snow, your boots more holes than leather sinking into the frozen slush. The forest looms ahead, a tangle of bare branches clawing at the gray sky. Medieval winter survival means you can't just hide in your hut, no matter how tempting. Life in the Middle Ages demanded you get out and scrounge. Even when the extreme cold in the Middle Ages makes every step feel like a betrayal of common sense. You mutter, "If I freeze out here, like I'm haunting this forest," but you keep moving. Foraging in the frozen wild is how peasants lived in winter. And your empty food pot's nagging you to find something, anything, to stretch your rations. The snow's knee-deep, crunching underfoot like broken glass. You've got a sack slung over your shoulder and a stick sharpened to dig through the frost. What did peasants eat in winter? Whatever they could find, and you're hunting for nature's leftovers. You scan the ground for signs of life, maybe some frozen berries or a forgotten root. Last fall, you marked a hazel tree with a notch, and now you're praying it's got nuts buried under the snow. You dig, your fingers stinging, and find a few hard as pebbles but edible. Jackpot. You whisper, though it's more like pocket change. You think of 1343 when a harsh winter drove wolves closer to villages. A story your uncle swears happened nearby. Historical survival stories like that keep you alert, your ears pricked for any rustle. The forest's too quiet, like it's holding its breath. You spot a patch of frozen moss and scrape it off a rock, remembering Agnes used it to thicken soup once. It tastes like dirt, but it's bulk. Here's a weird fact: some peasants chewed tree bark when starvation hit, claiming it eased hunger pangs. You're not that desperate yet, but you eye a birch tree like it's daring you. Historians still debate whether bark eating was widespread or a last resort, but you're keeping it as Plan Z. Your sack's pitifully light, so you push deeper, the cold gnawing at your face. You find a frozen stream and hack at the ice with your stick, hoping for fish. No luck, just a sprig of watercress, half dead but green. You stuff it in your sack, joking to yourself. Gourmet salad, medieval style. The Dark Ages winter struggles meant celebrating these tiny wins at Imesea, and you're clinging to them. You remember the goose fat you rubbed in your hands back in your hut. Call back to that slimy trick, and it's barely keeping your skin from cracking now. A twig snaps, and you freeze. Heart thumping. It's just a deer bolting through the trees. But it reminds you how dangerous this is. No fire, no food. Survival in medieval times meant risking your neck for a handful of nuts. You turn back, the village barely visible through the snow. Your haul's meager, but it'll add a day to your rations. Medieval peasant life during harsh winters was this grind, and you're living it. As you slog home, you mutter, "Next time, I'm sending the pig to forage." The wind laughs, but you're already planning tomorrow's hunt. You're standing in your hut, shivering as you tug at the frayed hem of your tunic, wondering if it'll survive another winter. Medieval winter survival hinges on what's covering your skin. And for you, clothing is your only armor against the brutal cold. Life in the Middle Ages didn't come with a wardrobe full of options, and the extreme cold in the Middle Ages laughs at your patched-up rags. You mutter, "If this is fashion, I'm the court jester," as you layer another scrap of wool over your shoulders. Medieval peasant life during harsh winters means turning every threadbare piece into a shield. And you're getting creative. Your tunic's a rough, homespun thing, stitched together from flax and wool. Your sister spun last summer, and it's got more holes than a sieve. So you've sewn on patches from an old sack. Your cloak, a heavy wool square, doubles as a blanket at night. Remember that mildew-scented pile you slept in? It's stiff with dirt, but it traps some heat. You've got no proper gloves. So you wrap your hands in strips of linen, looking like a half-wrapped mummy. Shoes, just leather scraps tied with twine, stuffed with straw for warmth. They're about as useful as socks in a blizzard, but it's how peasants lived in winter. You think of the peasants' revolt in 1381 still decades away, when folks like you demanded better lives. Historical survival stories whisper that even rebels froze in rags not much worse than yours. Clothing was so scarce that stealing a cloak could get you hanged. You've got a weird trick, though you rub your legs with old goose fat. Yep, that slimy stuff again to keep the wind from biting. Odd fact, some peasants stuffed their clothes with feathers or moss for extra insulation, like DIY down jackets. Historians still debate whether this was common or just desperation, but you're tempted to try it if you find more moss. You step outside to test your layers, and the wind slices through like a knife. Your neighbor, what? Shouts. You look like a walking haystack. You grin and yell back. Better than freezing like a lord statue? The Dark Ages' winter struggles meant leaning on humor to survive. And Watt's jab warms you a bit. You adjust your cloak, pinning it with a thorn because brooches are for fancy folk. What did peasants eat in winter? Still not enough, but you're burning energy just staying warm. So you nibble a crust of acorn bread from yesterday's forage. Back inside, you mend a tear in your tunic with a bone needle, cursing as the thread snaps. Agnes hands you a scrap of cloth from a worn-out apron, and you sew it on, joking. "I'm ready for the king's ball now." She snorts, and the kids giggle, but you're all feeling the cold creep in. No fire. No food. Survival in medieval times meant your clothes had to do the heavy lifting. You huddle together. Your layer's a thin barrier against the frost. How medieval peasants survived the cold winters was with stubbornness and scraps. And you're wearing both. You whisper, "Keep me warm." You lousy rags as the wind howls, daring you to step out again. You're trudging through the village, snow crunching under your tattered boots. As you head toward Watt's hut, the cold's like a fist squeezing your chest. But medieval winter survival isn't a solo game. Life in the Middle Ages meant leaning on your neighbors. And right now, you're all in the same frozen boat. You mutter, "If we don't share, we're all icicles," half joking as you knock on Watt's door. Medieval peasant life during harsh winters thrived on communal survival tactics. And you're about to pool what little you've got to make it through. Watt opens the door, his beard frosted from his own breath. "Got any grain?" he asks. Straight to the point. You nod, clutching your sack of barley. Same one you've been rationing like a dragon hoarding gold. In return, he's got a bundle of kindling, too precious to burn yet, but perfect for trading later. You both know the deal: no fire, no food. Survival in medieval times meant swapping what you had to keep everyone alive. The village works like this: a patchwork of favors and barters. Agnes gave a neighbor some dried peas yesterday for a wool scrap to patch your cloak callback to your walking haystack look. You huddle inside Watt's hut, where his wife and kids are wrapped in blankets, looking like lumpy ghosts. The air is as cold as yours, but there's warmth in numbers. In 1337, the 100 Years' War kicked off, and while lords bickered, peasants like you banded together to survive winters that didn't care about politics. Historical survival stories show villages pooling resources: grain, tools, even body heat to outlast the frost. You and Watt plan to share a pot of porridge tomorrow, cooking it at his place to save your wood. Odd fact: some villages slept in one big hut during brutal winters, like a medieval slumber party, to conserve heat. Historians still debate whether this was common or just a desperate last stand, but you're considering it if the snow gets worse. You joke. What's next? We all move in with the pigs. Watt chuckles, but his wife glares you're not far off. The Dark Ages winter struggles pushed folks to extremes, and you're feeling it. You hand over a handful of barley, and Watt gives you a small clay pot, cracked but usable. "For soup," he says, and you nod, already dreaming of something warm. What did peasants eat in winter? Whatever you could share, and this barter's a lifeline? You glance at the kids, who are playing with sticks like they're swords, and toss them a dried apple slice. "Don't eat it all at once," you say, winking, "or I'll trade you for firewood." Back outside, the wind's howling, but you feel a spark of hope. The village is your armor, each neighbor a thread holding it together. You pass another hut, where a woman's mending a net to trap birds, another communal trick. How medieval peasants survived the cold winters was with this kind of teamwork. Fragile but fierce. You head home, clutching the pot, muttering, "We're tougher than this frost." The snow keeps falling. But you're not alone, and that's worth more than a king's ransom. You're trudging through the snow toward the village church, its stone walls barely visible through the swirling flakes. The cold bites your nose, and you pull your cloak tighter, wishing it was more than a glorified rag callback to your haystack chic ensemble. Medieval winter survival wasn't just about food or shelter sometimes. It was the church that kept you going. Life in the Middle Ages leaned hard on faith, and the church was more than a Sunday stop. It was a lifeline. You mutter, "If prayers don't warm me, I'm asking for a refund," as you push open the heavy door. Medieval peasant life during harsh winters often hinged on these sacred spaces, where charity and community offered a flicker of hope. Inside, the air's still cold, but it's quieter, the wind muffled by stone. A handful of villagers huddle near the altar, their breath clouding like incense. Father Alfric, the priest, is handing out crusts of bread from the church's store's meager, but a godsend when you're scraping by. What did peasants eat in winter? Sometimes it was the church's charity, like this stale loaf you clutch like treasure. You nod thanks, joking softly. This bread's harder than my floor. Father, he smirks, used to your sarcasm. The church isn't just about food, it's a warmish refuge, a place to swap stories and forget the frost for a moment. In 1309, the Avignon papacy began, shifting the church's power to France, but here it's still the village heart. Historical survival stories tell of churches opening their doors during blizzards, saving folks from the extreme cold in the Middle Ages. You settle on a bench, the wood creaking under you, and listen to Alfric read from a tattered Bible. His voice is soothing, like a low hum, and it calms the kids huddled nearby. Odd fact, some peasants believed sitting near the altar could ward off frostbite, as if holiness radiated heat. Historians still debate whether churches distributed more food or spiritual comfort. But you're grateful for both today. You share your crust with Agnes's kids, who nibble like mice. The Dark Ages winter struggles made these moments precious neighbors praying together, sharing warmth and scraps. You glance at the stained glass, dim in the gray light, and joke to Watt, sitting nearby. Think the saints ever froze their toes off? He chuckles. But you're all clinging to this space, where the cold feels less cruel. No fire. No food. Survival in medieval times often meant leaning on faith, and the church's walls feel like a hug from the village itself. As you leave, Alfric presses a small candle into your hand, a rare gift for a late-night prayer. You mutter, "Better not burn the hut down," and he laughs. How medieval peasants survived the cold winters sometimes came down to these fleeting acts of kindness. You step back into the snow. The candles wait a small promise. The wind howls, but you feel steadier, whispering, "Thanks. Father, I keep the saints on speed dial." The church door creaks shut behind you and you head home, ready for another cold night. You're sitting cross-legged on the icy floor of your hut, rubbing your hands together to chase away the numbness. The medieval winters got you in a chokehold, and every ache in your body screams for warmth. Life in the Middle Ages didn't come with a doctor on speed dial, so medieval peasant life during harsh winters meant dealing with frostbite and chills with whatever you could cobble together. You mutter, "If I lose a toe, I'm blaming the weather," as you inspect your reddened fingers. Medieval winter survival leaned on crude remedies and a hefty dose of superstition. And you're about to try both. Your toes are tingling, not a good sign. So you reach for a jar of goose fat. Yep, that greasy savior again, slathered on everything from your hands to your cloak patches. You mix in some crushed herbs, a trick Agnes swears by, though it smells like a swamp. You rub it on your feet, wincing at the cold goo. What did peasants eat in winter? Barely enough to keep strength for this kind of self-doctoring. You're low on barley now, but you sip a watery broth made from yesterday's moss haul to steady your nerves. The extreme cold in the Middle Ages made every ailment worse. And you're not taking chances. You think of 1348 when the Black Death was creeping closer, though your village hasn't heard the worst yet. Historical survival stories whisper of peasants treating cold injuries with anything from prayer to pig dung poultices. Gross. But desperate times. You're sticking with herbs? Thank you very much. Odd fact, some peasants believed rubbing snow on frostbite warmed it up, which is about as helpful as hugging a glacier. Historians still debate whether medieval medicine did more harm than good. But you're hoping your herb fat mix isn't a total scam. You wrap your feet in strips of old linen. Joking to Agnes. Look, I'm a fancy mummy now. She rolls her eyes, but she's brewing a tea from willow bark for her own aches. It tastes like dirt, but it dulls the pain a bit. The kids, mercifully unbothered, are playing with sticks, pretending they're knights. You toss them a dried pea each, saying, "Don't spend it all in one place." And they giggle. The Dark Ages winter struggles meant keeping spirits up while your body protested, and humor's your best medicine. You huddle closer to Agnes, sharing a blanket callback to your blanket tent masterpiece. No fire, no food. Survival in medieval times meant fighting the cold from the inside out. You mutter a half-serious prayer to St. Hildegard, hoping her healer vibes are real. How medieval peasants survived the cold winters was with these patchwork cures, and you're holding on. The wind howls outside, but you flex your toes, feeling a faint warmth return. "Take that frost," you whisper. Ready to face another day of aches and remedies. You're knee-deep in snow, hauling a splintered rake toward the barn, your breath puffing out like a dragon with a cold. Medieval winter survival doesn't give you a day off, and life in the Middle Ages means chores keep coming, no matter how much the frost bites. You mutter, "If I wanted this much work, I'd apply to be a lord's mule," as you shove open the creaky barn door. Medieval peasant life during harsh winters demands you tend livestock and fix tools, even when your fingers feel like icicles. Winter work never stops, and you're learning that the hard way. The barn smells of damp hay and anxious animals. Your two scrawny cows huddle together, their breath steaming in the dim light. You fork them some hay, precious stuff. Rationed like your barley stash. Remember that clay pot you buried under the floor? You're just as stingy with this. Fighting the animals keeps them alive. And their milk, however thin, is part of what peasants ate in winter. You check their hooves, cracked from the cold, and rub them with a bit of that trusty goose fat callback to your frostbite remedy. It's not exactly veterinary science, but it's how peasants lived in winter. In 1327, Edward III took the throne in England. But out here, royal drama doesn't mean much when your cow's shivering. Historical survival stories show peasants toiling through blizzards to keep livestock alive. Knowing a dead cow meant starvation. You grab a broken hoe, its handle split, and start whittling it with a knife. Your hands stinging. Odd fact, some peasants used frozen cow dung to patch barn walls, claiming it blocked drafts. Historians still debate whether this was genius or just gross, but you're sticking with straw for now. You joke to yourself, "If I start slinging dung, I'm retiring to the forest." The wind howls, rattling the barn's rickety walls, and you pause to check the roof. A hole's letting snow drift in, so you climb up, cursing, and stuff it with hay. Your sister's kid, tagging along, giggles as snow dusts your face. "You look like a ghost," he says. You toss a snowball at him, muttering, "Keep laughing. and you're fixing the next hole. The Dark Ages winter struggles meant every task was a fight against the cold. And you're feeling it. You finish the repair and move to the chickens, who are fluffing their feathers like tiny kings. You scatter a few barley grains, whispering, "Don't get used to it. No fire, no food." Survival in medieval times meant keeping the animals and tools in shape, or you'd all be sunk. You'd trudge back to the hut, rake in hand, your body aching but satisfied. How medieval peasants survived the cold winters was through this endless grind. And you're part of it now. The snow keeps falling, but you mutter, "Work's done." Frost. Your move. The barn creaks behind you, holding strong for another day. You're trudging through the village, snow crunching under your boots, clutching a basket of woven reeds you made last summer. Medieval winter survival means scraping by any way you can. And right now, you're headed to beg or barter for something to keep your hut going. Life in the Middle Ages wasn't exactly a free market, but medieval peasant life during harsh winters forced you to trade skills or grovel to survive. You mutter, "If I have to bow to anyone else, I'll need new knees," as you approach a wealthier neighbor's door. The extreme cold in the Middle Ages makes every deal feel like a lifeline, and you're ready to haggle. You knock at Godric's hut, the village's unofficial rich guy with an extra pig and a stash of firewood. You've got no coin, but you offer to mend his fishing nets. Your fingers are nimble from patching your own rags. Call back to your mummy-chic tunic. In return, you're hoping for a handful of dried beans or a stick of kindling. Godric squints, then nods, tossing you a small sack of peas. "Don't tangle my nets." He grumbles. You grin, joking. "If I do, I'll blame the frost fairies." What did peasants eat in winter? Whatever you could trade for, and these peas will stretch your porridge. Remember that gritty barley mix? In 1349, the Black Death hit nearby towns, and word is some villagers survived by bartering for food before plague locked things down. Historical survival stories show peasants swapping skills, sewing, basket weaving, even storytelling for essentials. You've done it all, even begging once at the manor house, though the Lord Steward just sneered. Odd fact, some peasants traded lucky charms like carved bones, believing they'd ward off hunger. Historians still debate whether these were scams or genuine faith, but you're sticking to practical deals. You tuck the peas in your basket, feeling like a medieval entrepreneur. You try another neighbor, Old Meg, who's got a reputation for hoarding apples. You offer to chop her firewood, your arms ache from barn repairs, but you're desperate. She hands you 3 shriveled apples, muttering about curses if you slack. Cursed apples. Sounds like a fairy tale, you quip, and she cackles. The Dark Ages winter struggles meant navigating these social webs, where a bad deal could leave you empty-handed. No fire, no food. Survival in medieval times hinged on knowing who to charm or owe. You head home, your basket heavier, muttering, "I'm basically a merchant now." The wind bites as you pass the church callback to Father Alfric's bread crust and you consider begging there. But pride stops you. How medieval peasants survived the cold winters was through this dance of give and take, and you're learning the steps. You clutch your haul, whispering, "Not bad for a day's hustle." The snow swirls, but you feel a spark of victory. Ready to face the next trade? You're crouched in the corner of your hut, The dim glow of a single candle, that precious gift from Father Alfric, casting shadows on the walls. The cold seeps through your rags. But tonight, medieval winter survival isn't just about food or warmth. It's about keeping your spirit from cracking. Life in the Middle Ages leaned on stories to light up the long, frozen nights. And medieval peasant life during harsh winters turned storytelling into a kind of magic. You mutter, "If I have to hear Watt's pigtail again, I'm moving to the barn," but you're already pulling a blanket callback to your blanket tent masterpiece around your family for a tale. Agnes stokes the mood, her voice low like she's channeling a bard. "Tell us about the fox and the moon," she says, "and the kids, bundled like lumpy potatoes." Perk up. You clear your throat, the air so cold it stings, and spin a yarn about a clever fox who tricked the moon into lighting his path. Your voice dips and rises, mimicking the wind outside, and the kids giggle when you add, "The fox probably ate better than us. Lucky furball. What did peasants eat in winter? Not much, but stories fed the soul, and you're serving a feast tonight." In 1350, the Statute of Laborers tried to clamp down on peasants demanding better wages. Post-plague. But out here, tales were your rebellion, shared freely. Historical survival stories show villagers passing down legends to keep hope alive, from saints to trickster animals. Odd fact, some peasants believed storytelling warded off evil spirits lurking in winter's dark. Historians still debate whether this was superstition or just a way to stay sane. But you're all in. The candles flicker, making your foxtail feel epic. You pause, letting the kids beg for more, then switch to a ghost story about a lost shepherd, spooky but PG. No gore. He still wanders, looking for his sheep. You whisper, and Agnes fake shivers, joking. Hope he's got better boots than you. The laughter warms the hut more than any fire. The Dark Ages' winter struggles meant clinging to these moments, where words outshone the frost. No fire, no food. Survival in medieval times needed morale. And you're the evening's hero. You toss the kids a dried pea, each call back to your bartering hall, saying, "Payment for not snoring through my tale, the candle gutters." And you wrap up, the kids yawning. How medieval peasants survived the cold winters was with stories that stitch the village together. You blow out the light, whispering, "Sleep tight. Don't let the fox steal your dreams." The wind howls, but your hut feels cozier, filled with the echo of your words. You're crouched outside your hut, the snow up to your shins, clutching a stick you've sharpened into a makeshift spear. The wind carries a distant howl, and your heart skips. Medieval winter survival isn't just about staying warm, it's about keeping danger at bay. Life in the Middle Ages meant guarding your home from more than frost, and medieval peasant life during harsh winters turned every creak into a threat. You mutter, "If that's a wolf, it's getting a bad Yelp review," as you scan the dark. The extreme cold in the Middle Ages drew predators and desperate strangers to villages, and you're on high alert. The village is hushed, every hut sealed tight, but you know the risks. Wolves, emboldened by hunger, have been spotted closer than usual. Their tracks crisscrossing the forest where you foraged callback to your measly nut haul. You've wedged the door with a heavy stone, but it's flimsy. Like most of your defenses, no fire, no food. Survival in medieval times meant fending off threats with whatever you had. You've rigged a crude trap near the barn, a rope snare from old nets you mended for Godric, hoping to catch anything before it catches you. In 1346, the Battle of Crecy saw English archers triumph. But out here, your stick is no longbow. Historical survival stories whisper of peasants fighting off wolves with pitchforks or even bare hands. You grip your spear tighter, remembering Watt's tale of a neighbor who scared a wolf by banging pots. Odd fact. But it worked. Historians still debate whether winter predation spiked due to famine or just desperate animals. But you're not waiting to find out. You joke to Agnes, inside. If a wolf knocks, tell it we're closed. She snorts, but her eyes are on the door. A shadow moves near the barn, and you freeze. It's just a stray dog, scrawny and shivering, but it reminds you of human threats, 2 bandits or starving travelers who'd steal your peas. You've heard whispers of villages raided in winter, and your buried food stash callback to your clay pot feels like a glowing target. The Dark Ages' winter struggles made everyone a potential enemy, and you're ready to defend what's yours. You bang your stick on the ground, shouting, "Get lost, Furry and the dog bolts." What did peasants eat in winter? Not much, and you're not sharing with strays. You head back inside, the cold biting your face. Agnes hands you a cup of watery broth, muttering, "Hero of the night." You grin, saying, "Wait till I wrestle a bear." How medieval peasants survived the cold winters was with vigilance, and you're wired but alive. The wind howls, daring you to relax, but you keep your stick close, whispering, "Not tonight." Frost. Your hut's still standing, and that's a win. You're standing outside your hut, squinting at the sky as a faint warmth brushes your face, teasing you with the idea that winter might be loosening its grip. Medieval winter survival is a marathon, and the thaw's false promises can trip you up just when you think you're safe. Life in the Middle Ages meant navigating these tricky transitions, and medieval peasant life during harsh winters taught you to distrust a sunny day in February. You mutter, "If this is spring, I'm a dancing bear," as you kick at a melting snowbank. The extreme cold in the Middle Ages could shift to slushy chaos, bringing new dangers to your doorstep. The ground's turning to mud, sucking at your boots those tattered scraps you stuffed with straw. Call back to your mummy-chic layers. Your food stash is dwindling, and the thaw's warmth threatens to spoil what's left. You dig up your clay pot, remember that barley hoard, and find the peas at the bottom starting to smell funky. What did peasants eat in winter? Whatever hadn't gone bad, and you're tossing moldy bits with a grimace. You haul the pot inside, hoping to dry it near the candle you got from Father Alfric. But the damp air's not helping. Floods are the new enemy, and your hut's floor is a soggy mess. The rushes you piled now a swampy carpet. In 1315, the Great Famine was worsened by spring rains that drowned crops, a tale the village elder still mutters about. Historical survival stories warn of thaws that promised relief but delivered rot and ruin. You're checking your roof, patching leaks with straw, when Agnes points out a trickle of water snaking through the wall. Great. Now we're living in a moat. You joke, but you're scrambling to plug it with clay. Odd fact, some peasants ate sprouted grain during thaws thinking it was a delicacy, only to get sick from mold. Historians still debate whether this was ignorance or desperation, but you're not risking it. You slog to the barn, where the cows are restless, their hay damp and useless. You spread it out to dry, muttering, "You're pickier than lords." The Dark Ages winter struggles didn't end with snowmelt. Floods could wipe out your livestock or food in a blink. No fire, no food. Survival in medieval times meant staying one step ahead of nature's tricks. You barter a few good peas for Watt's help to dig a ditch around the hut, redirecting water. He grumbles, but joins, saying, "Next, we're building an ark." You laugh, but you're watching the sky, wary of rain. How medieval peasants survived the cold winters was by outsmarting these false thaws. And you're learning fast. You head back, mud-caked but hopeful, whispering, "Stay cold or stay warm." Just pick one. The horizon's still gray, but you're ready for whatever it throws next. You're gathered in the village square. Snow still patching the ground, but a faint warmth in the air hints at something hopeful. Medieval winter survival isn't just about enduring the cold. It's about clinging to rituals that keep your soul from freezing. Life in the Middle Ages leaned on faith and festivals to break winter's monotony. And medieval peasant life during harsh winters made these moments feel like gold. You mutter, "If this feast doesn't warm me, I'm converting to hibernation," as you join the crowd around a makeshift table. The extreme cold in the Middle Ages fades, just for today. As the village celebrates a winter festival tied to faith and defiance, it's Candlemas. February 2nd, and Father Alfric's leading prayers, his voice carrying over the chatter. Everyone's brought something. Your contribution is a small pot of barley porridge, stretched with those peas you bartered for. Call back to your merchant-level hustling. What did peasants eat in winter? On days like this, you shared what little you had, turning scraps into a communal feast. The church's candles remember that one Alfric gave you flicker in the breeze, symbolizing light returning. You nudge Watt, joking, "If I eat enough, maybe I'll glow too." He snorts, passing you a crust of bread slathered with rancid butter, a rare treat. In 1307, the Knights Templar faced accusations, shaking the church's influence. But here, faith still binds the village. Historical survival stories show peasants marking winter with festivals like Candlemas, blending pagan roots with Christian rites to boost morale. Odd fact, some villagers believed candles lit today could ward off storms if relit later. Historians still debate whether these rituals were more about faith or survival psychology, but you're feeling the lift as Alfric blesses the food. You scoop porridge, savoring its warmth, and pass the pot to Agnes's kids, who grin like it's a king's banquet. The village elder starts a song, a creaky hymn about spring's promise, and you join in, your voice rusty but earnest. The Dark Ages winter struggles fade as you dance well, shuffle in the mud, your tattered cloak flapping like a flag. "Look at me." Court dancer, you quip to Agnes, who's twirling her kids. No fire, no food. Survival in medieval times meant stealing joy where you could. And today's a heist. You light a twig from a shared bonfire, a rare luxury, and hold it high. Its glow a middle finger to winter's grip. How medieval peasants survived the cold winters was with these bursts of hope. And you're soaking it in. As the feast winds down, you head home, belly fuller than usual, whispering, "Thanks, Candlemas." Don't let winter crash the party. The stars wink above and you feel ready for the final stretch. You're standing outside your hut, the air softer now, carrying a whiff of damp earth instead of ice. Medieval winter survival has been a brutal slog, but spring's distant hope is finally peeking through the gray. Life in the Middle Ages taught you to spot the signs. Green shoots, birdsong, a sun that lingers a bit longer, and medieval peasant life during harsh winters ends with lessons carved into your bones. You mutter, "If winter comes back, I'm filing a complaint," as you scan the horizon. The extreme cold in the Middle Ages is loosening its grip, and you're reflecting on how you made it through. The snow's mostly gone, leaving mud that clings to your boots, those tattered scraps. Call back to your straw-stuffed armor. You check your food stash. That clay pot you guarded like a dragon, remember your buried treasure. It's nearly empty. Just a handful of barley and a shriveled apple. What did peasants eat in winter? Barely enough, but you stretched it with foraged moss, bartered peas, and sheer stubbornness. You head to the barn, where the cows are chewing fresh grass, their ribs less sharp now. You pat one, joking. You're looking less like a skeleton. Pal, spring means milk again, and maybe a chance to rebuild. In 1351, the Statute of Laborers tried to freeze wages post-plague, but your survival feels like a bigger victory. Historical survival stories celebrate peasants who outlasted winters through grit and community, and you're living proof. Odd fact, some villagers marked spring by planting a hope tree, a sapling to symbolize renewal. Historians still debate whether this was widespread or just local whimsy, but you're eyeing a spot near your hut for one. You grab a hoe repaired during those endless winter chores and start turning soil, the work warming your hands more than any goose fat ever did. The village feels alive again. Watt's fixing his fence. Agnes's kids are chasing a stray chicken, and even old Meg's out, muttering about her apples. You laugh. Colin, save me one this year. The Dark Ages' winter struggles are fading, replaced by plans for planting and rebuilding. No fire, no food. Survival in medieval times was a team effort, from church bread to shared stories. How medieval peasants survived the cold winters was with every trick you learned. Insulation, bartering, faith, and a bit of sarcasm. You pause, leaning on your hoe, and whisper, "We did it, Frost. Better luck next year." The sun dips low, painting the sky pink, and you feel lighter, like you've shed winter's weight. You head inside, ready to dream of green fields, not snow. You sit on the edge of your straw bed, the hut quiet except for the soft creak of settling wood. The air's gentler now, wrapping around you like a worn blanket. Not a blade. Spring's promise hums outside, in the drip of melting icicles and the faint chirp of a brave bird. You think of the village Watt's gruff laugh, Agnes's steady hands, the kids' muddy faces, and feel the warmth that's not just from the season's turn. You made it through the cold, not alone, but together. Each day a stitch in a tapestry of survival. The world beyond your door is waking, slow and shy, like a child peeking from under covers. The mud will dry, the fields will green, and your hut will stand, patched and proud. You blow out the last stub of Father Alfric's candle, its smoke curling like a whisper. For you, dear Canadian friend, picture your own spring maple buds swelling, lakes thawing under a kind sun. Let the winter's weight slip away. Let your eyes grow heavy. You're safe. You're here. And the story's done. Sleep now, wrapped in the glow of a new season's hope.